I want to talk about Danny's comments a little bit for those who missed it. It was interesting, the timing of it. We have a rock bottom loss against the Wizards on Sunday. Then Danny Ainge, as we mentioned at the top of the show, goes on literally, I mean, I think
great to see the relevance of a newspaper drop in 2021.
I think he sought out the Globe and the Herald and gave them both an interview at the same time. So it means he wants to do this. He wants to go on record and say some things. And this is, I don't know whether Brad was, do you guys really think Brad was under fire, or it's just like idiots like us and like in the chat, like it's talk, but like, there's that one thing that Gary wrote. So Gary Washburn in the Globe, in his column with his interview with Ainge, slips in this little dagger where he says, the Celtics have been tuning Brad out lately. It just kind of sat there. It wasn't really
like a team. They look like a team that's tuned their coach out. That's what he said. Yeah.
Yeah. So it just kind of sat there a little bit, and then it wasn't really qualified or addressed, or sources tell me, or I've whatever.
It was right at the end of the paragraph too. It was a little spot to put it.
Just sitting there, and it was just. And then the rest of it was about Ainge's interview, and a lot of it was cover for Brad, basically saying it's not on Brad. And this quote was from the Herald one. The Washburn quote was, "It's on the players. It's on the players, and the players on this team are on me." So I'm basically, but both of them are basically saying it's not Brad. I'm taking the heat off Brad. Do you think he felt it necessary to do that because he thought Brad was getting beat up? Do you think he's sensing a vibe that maybe there are some issues there and he wants to stand up and support him? I was trying to figure out the reason behind going out there and publicly. Or the other one is, you can't admonish players nowadays because they're going to get really upset and they all have attitudes and they're stars. So you can't do that. So this is a way to do that by basically taking it onto yourself by saying, I brought in these players. But he did say, if changes need to be made, I'll make them. It's not always the thing, but if it doesn't fix itself, I'll switch the guys out. So what did you guys make of these comments? Again, it was 2 different interviews, 2 different papers.
Yeah, so I guess. Oh, go ahead, Jimmy.
You go. All right, I'll go. I'm just gonna say, I guess I see it like 2 different ways. One, it's kind of refreshing to see so oftentimes the coach gets blamed first and for everything, and then the coach gets fired, and that's kind of it. And the players kind of get away with playing like shit, and then all of a sudden you bring in a new coach, and now all of a sudden they're trying again, and they're invigorated, and this and that. And it's kind of that's kind of some bullshit. But it was kind of refreshing to see Ainge sort of back the coach because he truly does believe in Brad. And one of the things I thought was kind of funny and kind of weird, and John, we talked about it briefly today, is that I haven't heard a single player on the Celtics really back Brad anytime recently. And that was interesting because I tweeted today, I was like, I'm interested to see if any players after the game today back Brad or defend Brad or stick up for the coaching staff. Because John, you mentioned it. We used to hear players talking about how much of a genius Brad Stevens was. We used to hear that fairly often. And we don't hear that anymore. Yeah. So I'm just wondering, how do the players feel about Brad? Is there a disconnect between Danny and Brad and the players, or Brad and the players, or is there not? I mean, is everything fine and dandy because all of a sudden they wanted to bring effort tonight? So I thought it was interesting that Danny Ainge made a point to go out there and defend Brad, not defend the players. So that tells me that he's disappointed in the players, not Brad. Obviously, but I mean, it's sometimes refreshing. Sometimes a GM will, fire the coach to take the heat off of him because he's the one who brought in the roster and brought in the players.
Well,
but
how many times in other sports have we seen that where the GM doesn't, where you see a coach twisting in the wind, or there's an incident, with a player and the GM doesn't back him,
right?
And that's bad. But I didn't see anything like that here. Like, there's not a moment where outside of talk, what we say on the show, what you see on Twitter, radio stuff. There's buzz, but only because, like I said, there's always heat on the coach here. But Joe Sway, go ahead. You were jumping in here.
Yeah, no, I think there's some truth to that. I think what a lot of it has to do with is Brad Stevens, from afar to what Jimmy just said. Before, remember those days when it was like, oh, Brad Stevens is one of the best assets the Celtics have because guys want to play for him. Young players want to play for Brad, and there was a lot of that. I don't think that necessarily he's lost this team, but I think maybe that sort of got lost in the message of what Brad is and the identity of this team, you know, and maybe some of that has to do with what happened in the bubble in Orlando and the conflict between the team and the locker room. But heading into the season, though, I think the approach was different because they all knew that they had a lot to prove. And I think Danny Ainge is starting to put more heat on himself because he's thinking, man, I didn't expect this from Tristan Thompson. I expected a little more. Jeff Teague, wow, he got outshined by the guy I picked almost in the second round. You know, man, I guess I struck gold there. You know, he
mentioned things he could have done as well in the Herald one.
So how are you, if you're him, right? How do you feel when you're hearing the shade go towards Brad Stevens? Like, wait a minute, I'm the one that gave him this, you know, I don't want to say crappy roster, but mediocre or, you know, still in flux roster. I set him up for that. And shoot, maybe another head coach, this would be a lot worse. You know, maybe Brad Stevens needs to take the heat off of him for a little bit because I'm the one that put this roster together. And it's my responsibility to go out and get those big free agents since Gordon Hayward walked out the door. I mean, again, people can put that on Danny too.
This is the tricky thing too about the Zoom world we're in media-wise, Jimmy. The topics that come up are the ones that get asked, and there's like 4 or 5 questions in these sessions, and that's it. There's not a whole lot of, you know, conversation going on in the locker room. So something like, hey, I know you got mad about the excuse of the schedule or something like that. Like, that's just a question that gets asked, and then something doesn't get asked about how much they support Stevens, so we don't know. I do know that Brown and Tatum had those 2 dismayed pressers over the weekend where you heard the shades of criticism come out, not direct, but Brown talking about the team needing help in some ways, and Tatum alluding to the young players catching up defensively and that kind of stuff. Like, you saw the sense of what might have given Washburn the idea that there was a fading trust in Stevens here, because there was an erosion of trust in some other things, it felt like, from both of them there. You know, how much help do we have? Are the right guys playing at the right times? Could be possibly something you pull from that, but they definitely both felt down. And then when it got to Brown's no comment thing on Sunday about the ball movement, it really felt like they were eating words about what they were frustrated about as the 2 stars of this team. Because let's make no mistake, Tatum and Brown over the last week or so have had to do almost everything up until tonight. And that gets frustrating. And I think they, at the very least, know that, you know, Stevens just can't magically bring them help. There's layers to this. There's adjustments that need to be made. I think they probably have a pretty good idea that changes are coming. So,
or maybe they want different guys in there too. It could go both ways.
That's what I felt like. Like, and so is Ainge
these other guys instead of these guys? You know, like.
Yeah, but I don't think what Gary said was a stretch, though. I mean, we've seen teams fall apart or teams give up on their head coach.
I just wonder what that's from.
The beginning sign, right? That's the beginning sign. The inconsistency, the lack of effort, getting your butt whipped, going back-to-back nights after you just had your best offensive night of the season. I mean, to Gary, to give some credit to him, that's sort of the pattern we typically see with a team that's had a head coach for 7 seasons now.
Well, I left this comment up because I did want to mention it. I was texting it earlier with you guys. The Kyrie thing, I do when we talk about like what Brad was talked about like before and then after. There was definitely a turning point where he went through a year where the Brad Stevens thing didn't work, and I don't know that it was whether it's his fault.
He's paying for that now,
and I think he's paying for it a tad because that's the problem. Is it took some of the shine off him a little bit because he had all the answers and he didn't have them that year because it was such a difficult year and a difficult roster. And Kyrie was blowing him up left and right, and then be like, "What? I didn't do or say anything." It was just a gross year. But also, it's just, I mean, I remember one time I was at a practice in Waltham. I mean, this is the stuff that you see, you don't like hear about too much. But I remember early in the season, with Kyrie and the entire team after the media availability, not Waltham, at Arbeck Center.
Yeah, I got you.
The entire team goes into the film room. Okay, they just walk in dutifully. They're just done dribbling and the practice is over. And Brad does his availability, and Kyrie just goes over and he goes to do something. And Brad's like, and an assistant comes to him and he's like, "Where is?" I just see Brad go, "Where is he?" And the guy's like, he went in there. He's gonna do some treatment and this and that. And Brad's just like, "Get him in here, just like, give me a freaking break. The whole team is in there." He's just like, he kind of composed. He's like, "Get him in there," Kyrie was on his own planet the whole season. But when you see your coach get emasculated like that, it's hard to unsee it, and that did hurt him a little bit, I think, where maybe that's one of the reasons why you're not, "Oh, Brad, oh, Brad, oh, Brad." I mean, Tatum and Brown had to sit there and watch this guy who they thought was, their savior and the guy who had all the answers absolutely just get dragged by these other guys, and it was ugly.
No, and it doesn't.
Brad now. I thought you were, big coach Brad Stevens. Now I was like, oh, that's just Brad.
Yeah, it's just Brad. Right. It's just you can't do that. And it's hard. Right. Once that happens to anybody, you get your legs chopped off. It's hard.
Yeah. And few of the guys on the roster this year, fortunately, were there for that. There was a cleaning of house. They fixed the chemistry, all that stuff they did in 19. Mm-hmm. So when it comes to who trusts Stevens, it comes down to, does Tatum trust him? Does Brown and Walker?
Smart.
I think Walker and Smart too. We know Smart trusts them. Like, there's no doubt Smart's bought into the system. He's been here since day one. Kemba, I get the feeling that Kemba loves this guy. But do Brown and Tatum, would they be dismayed if they moved on to him? To Jimmy's point, I don't know. Like, I haven't heard anything from either of them that makes it feel like Jimmy said, that they love him. That if he moved on, they'd be absolutely in tears and out of their mind. Like, I think Tatum and Brown have a feeling, whether it be from 19, 20, the run they had in 18, that they can get it done, they can handle it, and if there's a different voice at the top, it wouldn't matter all that much to them. Now, thank the Lord, Ainge has the bigger vision here and the trust in Stevens to know that it's not necessarily better on the other side. Because is Stevens doing everything he needs to build up this team and coach up the younger players? Maybe not. But could someone else be doing a much worse job with this pretty bad plate they've been handled? Absolutely. And you see it around the league every single year, the disastrous job that some coaches do. It's true in the NBA. The coaches don't always lift you up, but they can drive you into the ground.
Well, it comes down to this. Brad Stevens, if Jayson Tatum and Jaylen Brown are on board with Brad Stevens, then Brad Stevens is fine. That's really all that matters.
Yeah.
Nothing else matters. What we
it's
say,
the NBA.
what the fans say, what the chat says, what the media says, doesn't matter. If Jaylen Brown and Jayson Tatum are true believers in Brad and they're all in this together, then that's all that matters. Because what we saw in Philly with Brett Brown was that we saw a team that totally tuned out Brett Brown, Simmons, Embiid, those guys. By the end of it, you guys saw how it ended there last season. I mean, Brett Brown's a great guy, extremely smart basketball mind, came from the Spurs organization, and he was with that team for a long time, or with the Sixers for a good amount of years. And by the end of it, it just didn't work out. The players didn't have his back anymore. If that's not the case in Boston, then we're good. We're good to go. If not, then we have a problem.
But that's the whole ballgame. If they listen, that's it. That's where I guess the thing gets confused, Bobby. And again, we were talking about this earlier. It doesn't matter how good a coach Brad Stevens is. If you lost the players, you lost the players. He has not lost the players.
But what's losing the players?
If you do, you're done. Doesn't matter how good you are. People do get tuned out. It's not the case here. I don't think it's at all the case.
Right.
Not the case.
That's the syntax we have to get into too, though. Like, what does losing the players mean? Do you have a bad week and they kind of tune them out, and if things start rolling again, they pick
if the leaders start to
you know it.
You want to
go
in
when it happens. You know it when it
happens. If the leaders start to freestyle, Bobby, and you have one-on, one-off efforts, and that trickles down to the rest of the team, that's the problem. So you can't have. That's why. Look, Tatum has a COVID issue, and everybody's entitled to bad games. But if Tatum was one-on, one-off with an effort sort of thing. And, Jaylen, same thing, starts to get sloppy. The defense is sloppy. There's just games where they blow fourth quarter leads and, and you have effort issues. Then you start to worry that they're not playing for him anymore.
That happened in 2019, though, and he didn't lose his job. He didn't lose his job.
Well, that's where the Heat got turned up a little. You think the Heat got turned up on Brad in the playoffs. You're supposed to have the more talented team there, and everybody was like, and how many fourth quarter meltdowns? Josue, go ahead. Sorry.
No. I was just throwing in my 2 cents. I was like, but I wasn't quite. There was that going on between the team. He lost that team, but also I feel like the personalities they were clashing a bit here and there. Again, that's that's what happens when the team is disconnected from the head coach. They start to turn on each other a little bit. I mean, what was it? Marcus Morris shoving Jaylen Brown in that timeout in Miami. Kyrie Irving yells at Gordon Hayward in front of everyone because he didn't get the ball where he wanted in Orlando. In Brooklyn, he got pretty much bench for that. It wasn't official though. The Celtics didn't spank him in public and say, "Hey, this guy's suspended for a game." And I don't think that helped because that didn't bode well with the rest of the team. So there's a lot of things going on that year. Yeah, I mean, Brad lost his team, but I think they lost each other in a sense as well.
There's a lot of things going on this year too, though. You come into the year missing a fifth starter because Ainge didn't want to acquire a player during the offseason.
Yeah, but I don't think you have a personality. That's the difference, though.
Yeah, there's just a lot. They had the COVID layoff. You had to pretty much start a second team from scratch once Kemba came back, and you had to integrate him in. And he started 8-3. So there were
keep going back to that.
There were successes.
Extremely small sample size of games.
But after that, Kemba comes in. Kemba certainly hurt them in some games as he got reintegrated. They dropped a bunch of those. But make no mistake, the last week was a disaster. Like, absolute. The heat should have been on everybody after the weekend. But it's everybody. It's not just Brad. And I know Brad's always going to be, and the coach in the NBA is always going to be the first person you look to. But if you think of all the context involved here, firing Brad before fixing the team would have been absolutely insane to me. Like, it doesn't make any sense. You have
nobody was going to fire. Nobody was going to fire Brad.
It's not going to happen.
Going to fire Brad. But Bobby, when you
he's freaking out. I don't think that's what he meant. He's just throwing it out there, and he's right. That would have been crazy.
But this is a problem.
Yeah,
people can't criticize in this town. You can't criticize the coach without being an advocate of firing him. That's not what people are saying when they say Brad deserves some heat.
People were saying fire Brad over the weekend.
Some people are saying it, but again, we're not talking about Twitter or kind of like a chat room. You're talking about, like, are there really calls to fire Brad? Is it okay for people to actually criticize or wonder aloud whether he's doing everything at the highest level or if there's some things he can do better? I mean, it's insane to think that he's infallible and untouchable. That's where the conversation gets all goofy. It's just because you put a little criticism on Brad's plate doesn't mean you're advocating getting rid of him and bringing in somebody else to fix the team.
Yeah, but it sounds like you want to give him you want to write him up, right? I think that's why the big Brad Stevens fans are like, wait,
there are things you can say.
Don't you give our guy a warning? That's Brad Stevens, damn it. Give the guy a chance. That's what they think of. They think of when you bring that up once or twice, okay, that's the second write-up, that's the third write-up. The third time you bring it up, it's like, okay, now you want to fire the guy. So yeah, I mean, the diehard Brad Stevens fans they don't want to hear that right now.
But here's the thing. Brad gets the least amount of heat probably of every coach or every manager in this area. I mean, I heard more calls to fire Bill Belichick because of this season than I've ever heard of Brad Stevens. And I mean, you want to talk about crazy? I mean, that's crazy. So there's people giving Belichick heat because the Patriots missed one freaking season of the playoffs in the last 10 years and 2 in the last 20. So, I mean, really, that's kind of what Boston's kind of all about. I mean, it's not really anything against Brad, but Celtics fans are, I think, the easiest of the bunch when it comes to, being critical of, their players or coaches. So, again, and no one's saying fire Brad. You're right, Bobby. That would be absolutely crazy. But when you have games like you had on Sunday, you have to start wondering, is there a bigger issue here or is one developing? And when you want to talk about, how do you know when a coach loses the team? It's games like Sunday, and then if they followed it up with another shitty one tonight and then another one, that's when you know. Well, no one's saying that he's lost the locker room, but that game right there was a sign.